You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Fast ship. Never heard of the William Paul?
Never should I have.
It's the ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs.
What a piece of junk.
Covering Star Wars vehicles in less than 12 parsecs, this is Start Your Engines.
Don't get technical with me.
Here are your hosts, Paul Naylor and Mark Newbold.
You're listening to Start Your Engines. I'm your co-host, Mark Newbold, and joining me today is a man who, well, I would put him in the back seat of a TIE fighter any day of the week. Who are you today?
Today I am Alan Wicker.
Oh, that's a good choice.
There you go.
That's a deep cut. I used to love Wick as well.
And me.
Who else would walk on a runway next to a Concorde? I mean, really?
I mean, they really were your first sort of looks of things around the world from a touristy kind of perspective.
That's
him,
true.
And then Clive James. I used to love the Clive James stuff that came a few years later. Both now sadly gone.
Sadly gone. You're taking me back, man. You're taking me back. Today, we are talking about something very, very relevant. We're talking about the TIE Avenger. Now, watchers and viewers of Andor will know it's the vehicle you see at the very, very beginning of the first episode of season 2. Yeah. So let's get straight into it. That is a striking vehicle. So when you see that ship, and as we'll get into it as we go, we'll learn that this ship's actually been around for decades. But seeing it physically for the first time in Andor at the beginning, what were your first impressions?
The first impressions were that it was actually there, wasn't it? I think that was a physical prop that they built. Obviously, for a bit later on in that episode where it's bouncing around the walls, that quite clearly probably is not. But just to be able to walk up that ramp, there was that one technician, that the lady technician goes up into the ship, and you're looking around inside it thinking, this is actually quite roomy. Now, I don't know whether you agree with me, but I always found the cockpits of the regular TIE fighters and Darth Vader's TIE fighter, they look quite enclosed. Whereas this got plenty of room. There was 3 passengers in it at one point, wasn't there? There was Andor, and you got Bix, and you've also got Wilman as well in there.
That's right.
So you've got the 3 of them in there. Now, going back to the traditional TIE fighter, no way could you have that. So this really was an advanced TIE fighter. The comical thing about it was that obviously Cassian had been trained to fly one of these things. He gets in there and he goes, this isn't the layout that I've learned.
It's amazing that you think, because it's a prototype, because it's a really early doors, and you realise when you're watching Star Wars, the more you watch of Star Wars, that every little button, every little switch isn't labelled. So when in Solo, for example, when Han dives in the cockpit of the Falcon and flies when they're leaving Kessel to do the Kessel run, and he's just flick, 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 flick. And his dad worked on the production line. But we just look and go, how does he know that button from that button? But then when you're on a passenger liner and you go in the cockpit and it's a billion switches and you think, how do they know what every button does?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing, isn't it? It's frightening. I think I'm right in saying it was either Harrison or it might have been Mr. Ehrenreich. They said, right, well, what do I do to start the ship? What do I just make it up?
The more you see, the more formal it gets. I always love that in Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
When he has to fly the real ship and they're like, just do what you did on the show. And he went, I did something different every week. You know, it's that kind of thing. But I suppose if you're flying a ship that's so complicated, and this TIE Advance feels like that, you know, the TIE Avenger, that if you're slowly taking off and flying forward, you push these buttons. If you're slowly taking off and flying upwards, you push those buttons. So it kind of makes sense. It's an interesting vehicle. It was first seen in the expanded universe. Darth Vader's prototype TIE Advance X1, that was the test bed that we always thought led to the TIE Interceptor that we see in Return of the Jedi. And it was, but where the Avenger comes in is it was so expensive to make that the Avenger only got so far, and then the Interceptor became the weapon of choice, if you like, because they could mass produce it. It was, as you say, you mentioned the cockpit. It's a great point. The cockpit's a lot smaller on an Interceptor than it is on an Avenger. As you say, when you see it at the start of Andor, to see all those gadgets inside and just how big that thing is.
I don't know whether it's the same for you, but we saw the clip of this long before we saw the actual show.
We did.
So we saw the hangar bay and the stormtroopers trying to shoot at him. But my immediate reaction to seeing this iteration of the TIE fighter was that it didn't make me think of Darth Vader's TIE fighter. It did make me think of the Interceptor. But I can see where it fits in with the progression, if you like. But yeah, it's interesting that you say that it was so expensive that it was dumped. It's almost the HS2 of a galaxy far, far away.
Well, you say that. You know, you got your old TIE fighter, which was mass-produced, stamp them out like making Airfix models. No shields, no hyperdrives. This thing's got shields. This thing's got hyperdrive. Yeah. It's a bit like Vader's vehicle obviously has a lot of those things as well, because he's the guy that gets to fly that ship. And then you move forward. I think it's strange. You look at the First Order TIE fighter, which is physically much bigger than a classic TIE fighter. And also, we are so used to those sort of hexagonal wings for a TIE fighter. But actually, when you look at the various models of TIE, there's many more variations that have wings like an interceptor. Yeah. Now, the Avenger, even Kylo Ren with the Silencer and the Whisperer, much more like an interceptor. TIE Defender, there's less vehicles with your classic TIE fighter solar panels, if you like, than this sort of triangular wings that you get on an interceptor.
And my favourite of the whole range, the TIE Bomber. I love a good TIE Bomber.
Technical specifications.
Got to go for this because there's so much. It's Sonar Fleet Systems because it's a TIE fighter. It's from the TIE series. It's a twin-ion engine starfighter. 400,000 credits. Now, that is a hefty fee for any vehicle. But when you see it in Andor, we see once Cassian gets the hang of it, okay, we know he takes it to Yavin. We don't know for 3 episodes until he leaves. And he figures out how to jump around and fly in it and do all the things that he does in it. But it's only when he gets to Mina Rao, and he's just too late to save Brasso, sadly. But he is in time to get Wilman and Bix off, as you said earlier. Yeah. And you see the size of the vehicle. That ship, once you get the hang of it, you imagine if Mando had got that instead of the N1.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting twist, wouldn't it, to have seen an opposition's vehicle, if you like. But, I mean, that's been the neat twist of Mando as well, is that the look of a character, namely that Boba Fett, who has always been, when we were kids anyway, he was a bad guy. He was a bad guy. Completely. At the end of the day, he's not a bad guy. He's a mercenary. He'll work with anybody for any amount of money, won't he? So, and Mando, perceived as being a good guy, is exactly the same as Boba Fett. Which is why when you bring the two of them together, does that mean that Mando's bad or does that mean that Boba Fett's good? I mean, I tend to think that Boba Fett was good when we saw him working with Mando. It just comes down to that old thing that Obi-Wan Kenobi said on Dagobah. It all comes down to a point of view. You know?
Oh, I thought you were going to say, don't eat the Java droppings. That was the phrase I was thinking of.
What are they doing on Dagobah?
Exactly. Flavour. It's like an OXO cube.
I'm Anthony Daniels, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks. Well done.
10 metres long, so it's a longer ship than you think. Now, when it's on Yavin and crashed or landed and Cassian's been captured and the two halves of the rebels there are sort of squabbling and arguing with each other.
Yeah, which was interesting, wasn't it?
The Maya Pay Brigade, and they just can't figure it out. But they start turning the ship inch by inch. And by nightfall, by nightfall, they're going to have a chance of doing it. And you really see then the depth and the size of that ship. Like you say, in your head, you don't think an X-Wing's that big. But actually, when you see an X-Wing up close, they're quite big ships, actually.
With their magical disappearing yellow ladders. It's every time, I mean, you see Luke get into his X-Wing on Tatooine in Jedi. And you see Luke get into his ship, and then he just sort of like pushes the ladder away. Okay, so what are you going to do when you get to where you're going? It's just one of those things that just sort of bugs me. But still,
let's just pretend it's magnetic or it's got a homing beacon.
Yeah, that's what he does. It's polishing.
Maximum atmospheric speed.
1,300 kilometres an hour. So this can really, really go.
Engine specs.
Now, this is where it really gets meaty. It's got a SFS PSX 7.4 twin-ion engines.
Hyperdrive system.
It's got a hyperdrive system. Now, that marks it very differently from most TIE fighters, especially in the original trilogy era. Vader's TIE fighter would have had one, and regular TIE fighters didn't even have shields. There was that Marvel run when they did outfit a regular TIE fighter with a hyperdrive unit in the Shara Bree storyline.
Oh, right. I don't remember that. I remember the Shara Bree story,
Yeah, so Luke's TIE fighter had a hyperdrive unit in that one, but generally they don't. Not until later, not until you get to that First Order era, and it kind of becomes a fixed thing. It's got a SFS IS-3A solar ionization reactor. When you look at the history of the build up to Yavin, there's all these different plans and schemes and projects on the go, and so many of them fall to the wayside. And one of them is this project. Money gets defunded from the TIE Avenger. It gets defunded from the TIE Defender, which I believe from memory Morgan Elspeth was involved with. She was a ship designer. So there's all these different projects that different people get involved in, that as you go towards the Death Star, Project Stardust, everything else kind of falls to the wayside and everything gets put into building the Death Star.
Yeah.
Now, my point is that when you look at the Imperial era from Order 66 right through to the Battle of Scarif and Yavin, if you consider them as sort of a group of conflicts, the Empire is building. They're bringing in money. They're taxing people. They're aiming towards building this Death Star, because once this Death Star is in place, then the galaxy's pretty much on lockdown. They can appear anywhere. They can threaten. They can do single chamber reaction to take out a city, or they can go whole hog and do a Kajimi on a planet and just blow it to bits, or whatever they want to do. So it makes me think that all these projects that eventually fell to one side to filter every bit of coin into the Death Star, once Luke blows up the Death Star, and the point of this is the whole run of everything you see really in Andor right through Rogue One and to Star Wars to get Luke into that position. And it's all retroactive. It's Monday morning quarterback sort of stuff. We know that all the characters of Andor didn't exist when Star Wars was written, but we have this lovely ability to be able to go back and go, well, watching Star Wars, you're watching it with the point in your head of thinking, everything that Luke gets to do was set up by Cassian and Mon Mothma and Clea. I mean, Mon Mothma's been around for 40 years, but she wasn't around when Star Wars came out, even then. So all these sacrifices building up to give Luke the chance to blow up the Death Star, but from the Imperial point of view, look at all the opportunities to conquer and quash the galaxy they gave up just to put all their chips on black. Everything that's done by everyone, especially Luthen, even people like Lonnie Young, who sat in the heart of Coruscant feeding information to Luthen, and everything that Clea does by balancing everything and spinning all the plates, and then all the people physically putting it on the line, like Cassian, like Vel, and Mothma publicly with Bail Organa, keeping a facade in front of all of this machinery happening behind it to fund it. You know, all of these things. This is why I love Star Wars so much, and I'm sure you're the same. Now you go back and watch Star Wars, the original Star Wars, and think Luke couldn't even have a hope of coming out of hiding because of Bail contacting Ben to do the things that he asked him to do and giving Luke the chance. And that first run with Red Leader failing, and then Luke going in and turning off his hiding computer, and all these things that happen. Great shot kid, that was 1 in a million, you know. It's crazy.
There's been some very clever stuff come out in the Disney era that I don't think gets credit, which is
I agree.
The way that we look at Star Wars was changed by Rogue One. The way that we look at Rogue One was changed by Andor. It's almost like passing the baton, isn't it? If you imagine it as a relay race leading up to the explosion of the Death Star, you've got the beginnings of it all in Andor, passing the baton onto Rogue One, passing it on to what happens in A New Hope. To be able to retrofit stuff the way that they've done it, it's no mean feat, and I think it deserves a bit more recognition than it gets.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark fanthatracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Hull.
It's got forward and rear projecting Newbold X-Deflector shield generators, so they're very, very nifty. It's got a titanium hull with the quadanium steel solar panels, so it can take a hit as well. I think also, when you look at it, I mean, it's car showroom new, isn't it? You imagine that cockpit would smell of pine. They've peeled the plastic off the dashboard kind of vibe, isn't it, in that shit? So it looks fantastic.
But it almost looks like it's sat in a showroom anyway. It's got that jaunty angle in the corner of that hangar. Yeah.
I'd love to know who parked it, because it sure as hell wasn't Cassian.
Just needs a bit of a price sign in front of it or something. You know,
in the window.
Be good. Yeah, maybe
400,000 credits or newest offer.
Yeah, a Perspex display stand with a brochure. And some optional extras.
Navigation system.
It's got an SFSN S6 Navcom computer system, an avionics SFS FS5X flight avionics system, a top-of-the-line ship. As I can tell, Paul, you are very aware.
I'm more than aware, but at the moment I can't think of you as anything other than the Jeremy Clarkson of Fantatrax.
Armament.
SFSL S9.3 laser cannons, 4 of them, so it packs a punch. Also, SFS MG2 general purpose warhead launchers, 2 of them. Well, we see it launch warheads in Andor, both on Mina Rao and at the beginning when it's making the escape from Sinar, when it blows the bridge up to take the TIE fighters out behind it. 4 concussion missiles each, 8 if needed. 3 advanced proton torpedoes, 2 heavy rockets, 1 heavy space bomb.
We didn't actually see it deployed, did we? So
I don't believe we did.
Does the TIE fighter still exist?
That's a great point, because I would imagine, and I don't think it's covered, and also I think this is, going back to Andor briefly, I think this is one of the joys of Andor, that if we'd have had 5 seasons, and don't get me wrong, I would have loved 5 seasons of Andor, but I understand if they'd have ever wanted to do 5 seasons of Andor, this show would have needed to have started in sort of 2018 rather than 2022 when it did get started.
Because all of a sudden you'll have a very old-looking Diego Luna becoming a young Diego then.
Exactly.
As it is, it worked quite well. So
it's just right. But I think then you would have answered a lot of these questions. So I imagine, or I assume, that the TIE Avenger would have gone into rebellion research, so they've stripped it down and tried to get as much out of it as possible. There's probably things in that vehicle they could have used for the Alliance because there's so much kind of kit bashing going on. Or get a new transponder code and they use it for secret missions. I mean, there's all sorts. It's a big empire, so it was quite possibly used by somebody in an offensive way or a military
another secret mission somewhere. Yeah, so I mean, they can spin off from that. Why not?
Totally. Every 3 episodes was a year. But those 3 episodes didn't cover a year. They were just within a year. So you assume that whatever the time gap in each of those 3 episodes was, there's months and months until you pick them up again in the next batch of 3. So there's all this beautiful empty space.
Well, certainly for the comic book people, there's plenty of opportunities, isn't there? So
comic books, animated series, if they want to go down that route, live action, there's opportunities for live action.
I think ultimately they made the right choice with Andor to condense it the way they did.
They did.
It worked well. I've not heard anybody say anything bad about Andor.
No, isn't it strange?
Which is great.
People who watched and enjoyed Skeleton Crew really enjoyed Skeleton Crew. But enjoying Andor, it's the next course of the meal, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
There's not as much meat on the bone in Skeleton Crew as there is obviously in Andor because of the way Andor's constructed. But actually, I think that does a bit of a disservice to Skeleton Crew because if they pick up with that era and do more with it, I think you might look back at Skeleton Crew and go, they actually told us more in that than we think.
Skeleton Crew is like going out for a nice burger, maybe a Five Guys, whereas Andor's like going out for some sort of Michelin star sort of meal. I can't say enough good stuff about Andor, and we were both very privileged to go along to Andor the other week.
Oh yeah,
and what an event that was. But Andor, like I say to so many people, even if you're not a Star Wars fan, just watch it because it's just a great drama.
Absolutely, and this ship kicks off season 2.
Yeah,
it has a tractor beam and a jamming beam projector.
Crew complement. 1
pilot and 2 days consumables. But as we know, you can actually fit many more people in there if you need to. You could probably have fit. I bet if you squash people in, you could fit 5 or 6 in there.
I would have said 5. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, they were reasonably spaced out behind him, weren't they, Bix and Willman? So, there's probably more room.
Interestingly, it has an ejector seat. I mean, I suppose you think about it. You also Empire Strikes Back and they go through the asteroid field and you do see one TIE pilot spinning off in his seat. Yeah. So, did he eject? Or did the ship just disappear around him and there he is sitting on his seat? It's one or the other.
I'm going to say he had a panic attack and hit that eject button. Oh, God. This is going wrong.
Vehicle usages.
It's a multi-role craft. It's a space superiority fighter, an interceptor, also referred to as a snub fighter, which is a phrase we hear about the X-Wings and the Y-Wings going down the trench in Star Wars, and an assault fighter.
Affiliations.
The Galactic Empire, and rumoured also the Imperial Remnant, which may just hint at the vehicle having a future somewhere down the line.
Famous moments.
It goes back to the 1990s. It first appeared in Star Wars TIE Fighter in a module called The Steel Chronicles. It was also in Star Wars X-Wing Alliance, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. It's obviously mentioned in the guides to those games. It was in TIE Fighter Defender of the Empire, and then really started to get more traction outside of the gaming world in the Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels, which was back in the mid-90s. Box Tree released it in the UK, Del Rey in the States. It has a card in the customizable card game. It's in Galaxy Magazine 11. It was in the Far Orbit projects from West End Games, which is pretty much the last thing West End did before the final box set came out. It's in the X-Wing Alliance Strategy Guide, Star Wars Game of 5, Coruscant the Core Worlds, now you're getting into the Wizard stuff, the Complete Star Wars Encyclopedia by Steve Sansweet, and the Official Guide to Starships and Vehicles Collection, issues 8 and 13. So I read those out dry as anything to bring up the point that actually this ship that a lot of people think is brand new has been out there for years and years and years.
And has it always looked the same?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's pretty much had that look. They really did give it the shiniest shine up in Andor and really made it look beautiful. And also, I think one of the great things about seeing the vehicle in Andor at all, one, it's such a great sequence anyway.
Yeah.
But two, we get to see Sinar. We see one of the Sinar, I think it was Facility 73 from memory.
Yes.
So, and that's the planet. The planet is Facility 73. So they're doing all their testing there.
We've seen Corellia for the likes of the Falcon being built and whatever else. So to see the opposition putting their stuff together, it was neat.
Hey, it's Kyle Newman, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
What do you think of that vehicle now? Given everything we've discussed about Andor and its history outside of that show, and that's enough. I mean, we see it in great detail. We see it in action. It looks $1 million. It's a bitch to drive. Because there's no user manual. We know how much it costs. So what's your takeaway? Is it a vehicle you would like to see again? Understanding the tremendous cost of this, that it's not a cheap vehicle to make.
So whilst we never saw Phasma in a TIE fighter, I would imagine that sort of significant role within the structure of that organisation would have meant that would be your TIE fighter. So maybe that will happen at some point where there will be a significant stormtrooper or Imperial or somebody that has given one of those, a little bit like how Kylo Ren has got his version of the TIE fighter that was different from the others. Pre-sort of Phasma era, whoever suddenly comes along as being like the next big bad, they would have that as their TIE fighter. It's interesting that you listed all those different places and different lines the ship appeared in. I wasn't aware of it at all. So there's going to be people, when you first saw that picture on the screen and you realised what it was, you probably thought, my God, they finally brought it to the big screen, or the small screen, whatever you want to call it. But to actually give it a physical embodiment and give it some meaningful action. Was it a ship that when you saw it, you thought, wow, it's this? I didn't
initially cotton on that it was that ship, but as soon as I saw, probably on the databank on StarWars.com, where I first saw that it was TIE Avenger, and that rings a massive bell. And did a quick Google at Wikipedia, and there's always thanks to Wikipedia for the information. and there it was. It was, oh, wow, that's the ship from X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. That's the ship from all sorts of places we just listed. And a lot of the stuff that it is listed in is mid to late 90s and early 2000s. So it's not really seen that much action in the last 20-odd years. The fact that they went to that vehicle and built it up so much felt like the coolest deep cut. When they explained that this is that ship, oh my God, well, there you go. What a clever thing to do, because people who, like us, doing an episode like this, can actually go in and go, well, actually, this ship that feels brand new has actually got a crazy long history. And I love that about Star Wars when they go back and do these things.
Interestingly as well, there was the Star Destroyer Avenger as well, wasn't there?
There was. So the Star Destroyer Avenger, I think it's the ship that follows the Falcon into the asteroid field in Empire Strikes Back. So
I think it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder whether there's any link between the two.
There's only so many cool names that you can kind of bandy around without sort of reverting to the the USS Benny Hill or something. So you've got to
evening viewers.
Exactly. It's a milk cart, for God's sake. So if there is a connection, I don't know it. And also just doing Start Your Engines for yourself makes me want to go, and it has in the past, want to go and do a bit of Googling around and hit Wikipedia and just look into these things a little bit more.
That would be cool. I mean, there could even be like some sort of spin-off story from that where the two projects are interlinked and that somebody comes into it that becomes pivotal. Totally. It turns up in something later on down the line. And
it all connects, I think, a lot of it connects to the whole Scarif thing, the Citadel Tower, going down that column, looking for Stardust, looking for Pax Aurora, looking for all these other things that are all these projects, Operation Cinder, and all these different things that were knocking around, things that you see mentioned in Bad Batch. The cloning operation that was going on, and all these different things that so many got put to one side because the focus had to go on the Death Star. And I also wonder, given the failure ultimately of the Death Star, the fact that Galen Erso, if you want to drill down to the very core of all of it, is the kind of the greatest hero, because he left the back door open for Luke to do what he did. If Galen Erso hadn't have put that little thing in the design of the Death Star, it wouldn't have been destroyed. That was the mouse hole, that Luke went for. That if Krennic had have survived, if Motti had have survived, post destruction of the Death Star, they would have they would have disappeared. They wouldn't have gone to Narkina. They'd have just disappeared. They'd have gone like Mon Mothma's old pal went, never to be seen again. So
somebody came and took them somewhere.
Literally that. So I think that's all for this episode of Start Your Engines. I have very, very much enjoyed this, Paul.
Me too. Yeah, no, it's been fascinating to find out the history of a ship that, to all intents and purposes, many people probably thought only just appeared on our screens very recently. So to know that it's had such a lengthy sort of history and a run-up to be appearing in Andor. Just a final thought is that by having Andor, Rogue One and A New Hope in many minds as a new trilogy, it makes something far more powerful than perhaps even the original trilogy, because Star Wars A New Hope has got a very definite ending to it, a very sort of upbeat ending. And the fact that we can now sort of like view that differently than we did even as recently as pre-Rogue One, to me, it's masterful that they can come up and do that.
I agree. And doesn't it make you think that whatever they do next, if it can make you reevaluate something in a positive way, and I think, as you just said nicely, everything that Andor makes you rethink about Rogue One, which makes you rethink about A New Hope, makes it better. It doesn't take anything away. It doesn't alter anything to its deference. It makes it better.
So on that bombshell, I'm very much looking forward to Star Wars Episode 7.5.
Thanks for listening to Start Your Engines. If you want to be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com and be sure to comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds at Fanthatracks. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. Subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing the Fanthatracks intro and our Start Your Engines opening music, Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers, and of course the data miners at Wikipedia. Remember to tune in to Good Morning Tatooine. It's live Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock UK time, 4 PM Eastern and 1 PM Pacific on Facebook, YouTube and Twitch. And check out our Fanthatracks Radio Friday night rotation. It's every Friday night at 7 o'clock UK time for new episodes of The Phantom from Down Under, Planet Leia, Desert Planet Discs, Start Your Engines, Collecting Tracks, Cannon Fodder, and special episodes of Making Tracks, and every Tuesday at 7 o'clock UK time for your weekly episode of Making Tracks.
We'll be back with the next episode of Start Your Engines very soon. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I can guarantee it will not be Star Wars Episode 7.5. Thank you, Paul, as always.
You're welcome.
Coming up next on Fanthatracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.